Remembrance Day. Today we remember the 6 million innocent Jewish men, women, and children who were systematically murdered by the Nazis. We also pay tribute to the bravery and resilience of survivors and of all of those who risked their lives to save others during the Holocaust. Je veux d'abord souligner Yom HaShoah.
I would like to underline Yom HaShoah, the commemorative day for the Holocaust. Today, we remember the 6 million men, women, and children, Jewish, that were systematically massacred by the Nazis. We also pay tribute to the courage and the resilience of the survivors and all those who risked their lives to save the lives of others during the Holocaust period.
This morning, I want to again extend my most sincere condolences to the families and friends of the victims of the terrible Nova Scotia attacks. Since yesterday, I've had the chance to speak with Constable Chad Morrison, the RCMP officer who was wounded, as well as Constable Heidi Stevenson's family. On behalf of all Canadians, I thanked them for their service and their sacrifice. Yesterday, when I offered my sympathies to the RCMP officers who support me, I was amazed to see how many of them knew Heidi and had incredibly fond memories of her. They'd worked with her on the musical ride. They remembered her as an extraordinary person. And it really goes to show just how tightly knit not just the RCMP is as a force, but how close we are as a country. Hier, j'ai eu la chance de mentionner.
Yesterday, I had the opportunity to mention to the RCMP who are around me that I offered my sympathies, and I was very touched to hear them talk of Heidi. Some of them had served with her, for example, on the carousel, and they outlined how extraordinary a person she was. And it reminds me of the fact that not only is the RCMP closely knit, but we all as a country are connected to each other.
Yesterday afternoon, I visited the Canadian Police and Peace Officers Memorial on Parliament Hill to pay tribute to Constable Stevenson and to recognize the contributions of all law enforcement members to keep us safe. I also spoke to a number of colleagues from Nova Scotia, both past and present, and sought Senator Stan Kutcher's advice, both as a Nova Scotian and as a mental health expert. These calls reinforced what we all know about Nova Scotia, that it's a special place where people stick together and look out for each other. This week, we are all Nova Scotian. The families of the victims can count on the unwavering support not only of their neighbours, but of every single Canadian.
It's now been some weeks that we're asking everybody to follow the directives of health experts to protect your health and that of others. Isolation, social distanciation, and physical distanciation is an adjustment for the majority of us. And for some, the consequences of this pandemic are even deeper than a simple adjustment. The virus had as an effect to aggravate inequalities that already existed in our society. The most vulnerable, like seniors, young people without a home, persons unemployed, and single parents are particularly affected by the COVID-19. At the same time, the number of people who need a helping hand to get through this difficult period has also increased. Well before the pandemic disturbed our lives, charitable organizations were there for our communities. I'm thinking, for example, the PIO that helps young people at risk, or Modesto Saint-Michel that offers cheap meals. And in Papineau and throughout the country, community organizations are an essential resource for our most vulnerable, and their mission during this pandemic has not changed. But people need more support in order to help their increased number of clients. So the government is implementing an emergency fund for community support. This fund will have an envelope of some $350 million to support community organizations and non-profit organizations. Part of the funds will go directly to small independent organizations, and the rest will be provided to them through central organizations like community care, etc. These community organizations can use this money in order to train volunteers, increase home delivery for seniors, or offer transportation services for the handicapped. With this fund, we are providing these organizations more resources to adapt to the realities and the difficulties brought about by the pandemic.
Charities and nonprofit organizations were doing crucial work to help our communities. Their mission has always been to support people in their time of need, and that hasn't changed. But COVID-19 is putting a tremendous amount of pressure on those organizations because more people need help. For example, back in March, one United Way partner in Winnipeg made and distributed 1,475 emergency kits for families, seniors, and homeless people in just 5 days. Organizations have also had to change the way they deliver services because of the rules that everyone has to follow to keep each other safe. Here in Ottawa, there are a number of organizations that are focused on serving isolated seniors. Usually, they have day programs where seniors can socialize, participate in activities, eat well, and maintain a connection to their community. That's no longer possible because of COVID-19, so organizations are now delivering meals and providing support via phone. In Toronto, Tropicana Community Services is now helping vulnerable youth access their COVID-19 benefits. It takes resources to make these kinds of adjustments, resources these groups don't have because they're spread so thin, trying to help as many people as possible. So to support charities and nonprofits in their important work, our government is setting up a $350 million emergency community support fund. A portion of these funds will go directly to smaller, independent frontline organizations, and the rest will flow through national organizations like the United Way, Community Foundations Canada, and the Red Cross that can get funds to local organizations and vulnerable people quickly. This is money for things like training volunteers, increasing at-home deliveries for seniors, or driving people with disabilities to appointments. With this fund, we're giving more resources to charities and nonprofits so they can adapt to the new realities and difficulties brought on by this pandemic. Notre gouvernement a mis en place.
Our government has implemented a three-point plan to protect jobs and help those who have lost their job, as well as supporting small businesses that have cash flow problems. Today, I have some more news about the Canadian emergency wage subsidy that provides admissible eligible employers up to $840 a week per employee in order to allow them to keep their employees on the payroll. We're launching a calculator on the CRA website that allow businesses to determine just what that wage subsidy will cover. Businesses can submit their application as of next Monday, 27 April. Later today, the President of the Treasury Board, Jean-Yves Duclos, will provide more details about the implementation of this program.
Is also helping business owners and entrepreneurs adapt to a new reality with the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. This new measure gives qualifying employers up to $847 per employee each week so they can keep people on the payroll. Today, we're launching a new calculator on the CRA website so businesses can determine the amount they can expect to claim through the wage subsidy. Employers will be able to apply as of this Monday, April 27th. Later today, Minister Duclos will be providing more details regarding the rollout of this program. And I want to turn now to some encouraging news on the innovation front. Our Supercluster initiative brings together small, medium-sized, and large companies, academic institutions, and not-for-profit organizations to generate bold ideas and innovate. So a few weeks ago, The Digital Technology Supercluster challenged its network of over 500 firms to come up with solutions to help Canadians get through this pandemic. They received over 300 submissions, and they are now moving forward on a number of key projects. Toronto's DNA Stack is developing a new cloud-based network that allows researchers who are looking to improve our ability to diagnose and treat COVID-19 to share their findings. Another company, FoodX, is working with its partners to develop an e-grocery management system to make sure our healthcare workers, seniors, and others have access to fresh food during this crisis. Canadian innovators are among the best in the world, and it's great to see so many of them use their talents to help our communities. This is yet another example of what we can achieve when we work together as Team Canada. Cette semaine,
this week and over the ensuing weeks, you can count on us to continue to find other ways of helping you. We will continue to do our share as you shall also do yours. It's been some 6 weeks now that you have been in isolation at home, that you wash your hands regularly, and that you maintain a social distancing of 2 meters with other persons. A month and a half is a long time, but your efforts are paying off. We see some early positive signs that we're heading in the right direction, and that is mainly due to you. So let us continue to follow the advice of our health experts, and together we'll get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll now go to the phone lines for questions. Just one question, one follow-up. Over to you, Operator.
Thank you. Merci. First question, Christy Kirkup, The Globe and Mail. Line open.
Good morning, Prime Minister. How will you help millions of Canadians who now find themselves without medical benefits during a global pandemic?
We know that the way we get through this particular crisis is by pulling together and making sure those who are most vulnerable get the support they need to stay healthy, to stay isolated, and get through this. That's key, not just to remain true to our values in protecting people, including the most vulnerable, but it's also key to being able to recover quickly once we're through this pandemic. That's why we continue to work with partners across the country to highlight gaps and challenges and things we need to do more to help people afford cost of living that is in many cases going up because of this crisis. We will continue to work with partners to make sure we're getting that help out there. Nous reconnaissons que pendant cette pandémie,
we recognize that during the pandemic, there are many people who are suffering and need help. That is why we have implemented a number of measures that will help many, many people. But we do recognize that there are still people who need more help. That is why we're working with our partners and people throughout the country and the other levels of government in order to help people get through these difficult times and come back stronger after the end of the pandemic.
Millions of Canadians are finding themselves, though, without medical benefits because they have been laid off. And Dr. Eric Hoskins has said that Ottawa could cover the cost of the provinces and territories bringing Canadians into their formularies as an interim step to help. Is this something your government is willing to do?
We're going to continue to work with all sorts of experts and smart folks making recommendations from across the country in different ways to make sure we're doing everything we need to help Canadians through this crisis. We're always looking for more things to do, and we will continue to do the things that need to be done in order to help Canadians.
Thank you. Next question, Operator.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Michel Lamarche.
Next question, Michel Lamarche, TVA News. Good morning. On the wage subsidy, we understand that applications will be received as of next Monday, but can you tell us at what point businesses that will apply will get the money to pay their employees? Well, the reality is that during this crisis, people actually do need almost immediate assistance, and we have to deliver it as quickly as we can. We have recognized that this wage subsidy will take a little while to start the payouts. We're still working on it. Applications will be received as of next Monday, 27 April, and do hope that we will be able to quickly pay out shortly after that. But it will take at least several days after that, and that is why that we have set up measures to provide for credit to companies of all size in order to allow them to get through these difficult times. The money is coming. The online calculator will allow companies to see exactly how much money they're going to get from the federal government under the wage subsidy program in the weeks to come, and therefore they can make the temporary loans necessary to pay people already now.
Recognize the need for support as quickly as possible, and that's why we're working extremely hard to get help out to people. We started with the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, which has now helped over 8 million people across this country and made a significant difference. But we also want people to get we want other people to get the emergency wage subsidy, which means working with businesses to keep people on the payroll through this so that they can not only retain a job, but have a job to get back quickly to as soon as the economy picks up again. We have announced that on Monday people will be able to register for this online. As of today, however, they can see what the amount they're likely to be able to get through this and be confident in their ability to access credit from banks, from agencies like BDC and EDC, to be able to support people right now in this time of need. We're moving as quickly as we can. We move very quickly on the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. We hope to be able to get this help out to businesses to keep employees on their payroll as quickly as possible.
Michel?
A follow-up question, Michel? Mr. Trudeau, what does quickly mean? Will it be as quickly as for the emergency measure, or will it take longer than that? Or will it be a week or 2 weeks before money starts flowing? Minister Duclos will be addressing this point precisely shortly. But I can tell you already that people who are working at the Canada Revenue Agency are working very, very hard in order to get the money out the doors as quickly as possible once applications have been received. But yes, it will take some time, but people can know that the money is on the way and therefore shouldn't hesitate to use the credit facilities offered by banks and other institutions like the BDC and the EDC.
Merci. Next question, Charlie Pinkerton, iPolitics. Line open.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Yesterday, Public Safety Minister Bill Blair said he intends to introduce stricter gun laws as soon as possible, and you said your government was on the verge of introducing an assault rifle ban before the pandemic caused Parliament to suspend. Will a gun control bill be introduced in the restricted version of Parliament that we see during the pandemic, or will it have to wait until Parliament returns to normal sittings?
Obviously, we are all reeling from the tragedy in Nova Scotia, and our focus right now is on supporting those families as quickly as possible and as well as we possibly can. On gun control legislation, we made strong commitments to move forward with that rapidly. As you mentioned, we were on the verge of bringing it in before Parliament was suspended through COVID-19, and we're now looking at the right way and the right moment to bring it forward. The tragedy in Nova Scotia simply reinforces and underlines how important it is for us to continue to move forward on strengthening gun control in this country, and we will do that at the appropriate time. The tragedy
in Nova Scotia has pointed out how important it is to continue to advance on firearm control. We had made strong commitments on that point during the election, and we were on the verge of introducing measures in the House to restrict the possession of assault-type weapons in Canada before Parliament was suspended because of COVID-19, and we're now trying to find the appropriate moment to reintroduce this bill or to introduce this bill in the House. But we will take the time to ensure that it's done properly.
So which of your government's promised gun control measures will it be that it introduces first? Will it be the assault rifle ban or something else, perhaps influenced by what happened over the weekend?
The legislation on the assault rifle ban was almost ready to go when the Parliament suspended. So I expect that'll be the first measures we bring forward. But of course, as we learn more about this terrible, terrible tragedy in Nova Scotia, we will keep reflecting on ways that we need to help Canadians stay safe in their communities, in their homes, and across the country.
Thank you. One more question on the phone, please, operator.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Mélanie Marquis.
Next question, Mélanie Marquis, La Presse. Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. I'd like to come back to a question that was asked to you yesterday during the question period in the House about 3 planes that were supposed to land in the country loaded with medical equipment originating in China and that came back empty. Could you please give us some details on this? Answer, I received more information on it. One plane was supposed to bring equipment back for the Government of Canada. Another one that did bring equipment for a specific province, equipment ordered by the province. There are very limited time periods that a plane can remain on Chinese territory. And there were unfortunately long delays about moving the merchandise to the airport for loading, and therefore the planes had to take off without having had the cargo loaded aboard. But we continue to work unceasingly in order to bring the necessary medical equipment and deliver it to our people. We received quite a bit of equipment these last some days. We're expecting more in the days ahead, and so far we have been able to respond to provinces' needs at every step. I do understand that it is rather difficult for people working in our healthcare system to hear this kind of news, but we will continue to ensure that we do deliver the necessary equipment.
We have I got more information on the issues around the two planes that landed empty yesterday. One was a Government of Canada charter. The other was chartered by a specific province for one of their orders. There are severe restrictions on the ground in China in terms of how long a plane can actually stay in their airports before having to leave, whether it's full or not. And at the same time, supply lines and truck shipments to the airports are difficult and interrupted by checkpoints and quarantine measures. For the most part, we've been able to navigate through those and ensure that Canada has received the equipment that it needs, but these two airplanes were forced to take off empty. We will continue to work through a very difficult situation to ensure that, as we have been, we make sure that Canadians get, Canadian provinces, Canadian institutions get the equipment that they so desperately need. We're continuing to receive millions of pieces of PPE over the past days. We expect many more over the over the next days and weeks, as well as the Canadian industrial facilities tooling up their ability to deliver PPEs. It's always a challenge to get the PPE into Canada in a time where the global market is very, very competitive for these. But we have managed so far to get the equipment that provinces have asked for, and we will continue to make sure we're prioritizing support for our frontline workers who are going into battle every day against this virus.
So what happened with the equipment? Is it still ours somewhere in a warehouse, or some other country laid their hands on it since we weren't there? And what is the other province where equipment was supposed to be sent? Answer, we will continue to ensure to do a follow-up on our orders in order to receive the equipment that we need, and we will continue to ensure that trips are made, chartered flights set up in order to take delivery of equipment that we need. Now, about the province, I'll let that province itself share that information.
Prime Minister Molly Thomas, CTV National News. I want to ask you a question on behalf of Nick Beaton, who lost his wife, Kristen, from the senseless violence in Nova Scotia this weekend. He just spoke with our chief anchor, Lisa Laflamme. His wife, Kristen, died. She was a frontline worker, a dedicated nurse, and was also pregnant. And she was forced to reuse her personal protective equipment because there was not enough. So on behalf of Nick, let me ask you this question. Why aren't there enough PPEs for nurses and other healthcare workers, not only in Nova Scotia, but across the country? And where is the supply chain broken, and what are we going to do about it?
Okay. First of all, to Nick and to all the families going through heart-wrenching loss right now, looking for answers, looking for reasons, looking for support. We are there for you, and we will be there for you. Like so many people across the country who are worried about what the next days will bring and what the challenges are facing, our frontline workers have been worried about the continued availability of personal protection equipment. We've seen a number of provinces talk about possible shortages, a number of days away. We've managed to cover those, but we are in a situation where people are having to make choices to try and stretch out our PPE as long as possible. Different provinces are managing their stockpiles differently. The federal government is there to support provinces in their requests, and until this point have been, up until this point and beyond this point, have been able to respond to the specific requests that provinces have made. At the same time, we have been fighting in a very competitive international environment where everyone is looking for PPE, which is why we've made significant investments in domestic capacity to make the kinds of equipment that is going to keep frontline health workers safe across the country. D'abord, je veux exprimer toutes mes condoléances.
First of all, I'd like to offer my deepest condolences to Nick and all of those who have lost loved ones in this awful, senseless massacre in Nova Scotia. It's an unimaginable situation. We will always be there to support you and all people who suffer in times such as this. Now, with regard to our healthcare workers who are worried about having the necessary personal protective equipment to protect them, provinces manage their own approaches and protocols on the use of this equipment. The federal government will always be there, and it's always been there, to respond to provinces' requests to deliver equipment. And several times we've heard provinces say, oh, we have a 3-day supply before we run out of this or that. In each case, we've managed to avoid shortages, but provinces are taking measures to make equipment more and more available. We're working really hard on the international level in a world that has become very competitive for this in order to procure the necessary medical equipment. We have managed so far to fill all necessary provincial orders, but we do know that we absolutely have to develop a domestic capability of producing this equipment, and that's why I'm so happy to see that a large number of Canadian companies have stood up to make the necessary equipment, and they will be available shortly.
So you said there that you've been able to deliver personal protective equipment to what the provinces have needed, but isn't the supply chain broken if a pregnant nurse has to reuse masks and gloves?
These are decisions that are taken by provinces on how they extend and how they require the use of PPE. Different provinces have different burn rates in terms of use of PPE. We have worked as a federal government to ensure that when provinces have made requests of us for more personal protective equipment, we've been able to deliver what was needed. These are things that we're fighting for every single day, and we want everyone to be able to have the equipment they need. les différentes provinces prennent leurs décisions par rapport
Provinces make their own decisions with regard to the management of their healthcare system and the use of personal protective equipment. Our responsibility at the federal government level is to be there to support provinces in fulfilling their needs, and so far we have mostly been able to answer to the needs. Of course, we have to continue doing everything possible.
Prime Minister, when you were talking about the gun control legislation, you brought up the tragedy in Nova Scotia. I wanted to know if you've been briefed on what kind of gun or guns were used in Nova Scotia. Do we know that they were legal? And based on that, how would your proposed gun control legislation have potentially prevented this shooting?
There is still a tremendous investigation going on by the RCMP right now. There are many, many different sites, many different questions that a lot of people have, and I'm going to trust the RCMP on releasing information as they feel it is important to.
But with regards to the gun control, why are you joining the two?
We have gun control legislation ready to move forward on. We were almost ready to move forward on it a number of weeks ago. We continue to see it as a priority. We had every intention and have every intention of continuing to move forward on it when things restore to order. It did not need or take this tragedy for us to be committed to gun control. We've long been committed to it. This is just another tragic reminder of the fact that we need to do more to keep Canadians safe.
And sorry, just as my follow-up is on the World Health Organization, Ireland had said it's going to quadruple funding for the WHO, and Australia and the UK are calling for an independent investigation into China's handling of the crisis. All of them are Canadian allies. So is Canada going to up our contribution to the WHO, and are we going to be calling for an investigation?
We have been increasing our contribution to the WHO in order to deal with this pandemic. We fund them to the tune of tens of millions of dollars a year. At the same time, we do need to find answers to how this happened, so we understand how to ensure that it never happens again, and that is certainly something Canada is going to be part of. Okay. Nous continuons de contribuer.
We continue contributing to the World Health Organization. This is an important decision, particularly in these times of a pandemic. But certainly, we will have to get the right answers in order better to protect ourselves as a country and as a planet for the next possible pandemics.
Prime Minister, we've seen outbreaks of COVID-19 at meatpacking plants in Alberta. Should Canadians be concerned about the security of their food supply chain, and what more can the government do to protect that supply chain?
We've heard from Canadian beef producers and associations that the priority will be ensuring Canadian supply before they move to exporting. Much of our beef is exported, but right now the priority will be on domestic supply. So we are not at this point anticipating shortages of beef, but prices might go up. We will, of course, be monitoring that very, very carefully. At the same time, we know that it is extremely important to do everything we can to keep Canadians safe, to keep workers in all industries across this country, essential or not, as safe as we possibly can, and I'm pleased to see measures being taken to reflect on how to keep people safe. La réalité, c'est que
the reality is that meat producers in Canada have given priority to delivery to our domestic market. There might be, therefore, reduced exports, but we can be sure that our own supply chain in beef is sure. There might be a price increase, but we will be monitoring that quite closely. What's important here is to ensure that we are protecting the workers in our essential industries and others from COVID-19, and therefore we have to take the necessary measures to ensure their safety.
Is there going to be further support for the oil industry? And beyond that, will there be support for provinces that rely heavily on oil revenues and might need help with their finances, their debt, to recover from this downturn?
Our focus from the beginning has been on helping Canadians, families, workers across this country, and we have put in place significant measures that have an impact on all industries, including the oil industry, with the Canada Emergency Response Benefit and the wage subsidy, which have helped thousands of workers across Alberta, across the oil sector in this country. We've moved forward on other measures as well to help out that sector specifically, and we're always open to working more on helping particular industries or particular areas that need support to get through this COVID-19 crisis. We will continue those discussions. On supporting provinces, we recognize that various provinces are facing real challenges in terms of cash crunches, in terms of liquidity, and our Department of Finance and others are engaged closely with different provinces on challenges that they're facing specifically.
Bonjour, Philippe Vincent Foisy de Radio-Canada. Tantôt dans votre
Vincent
discours,
Foisy, Radio-Canada. Earlier you said that we're seeing some encouraging signs. I was wondering just what those signs are, in your opinion, and on the wage subsidy. Could you assure us that not a single dollar of that money will be going to businesses that have accounts in tax havens? Now, answer, with regard to the encouraging signs, we see that when we look at the curves and the numbers about the spread of COVID-19, there's a reduction in the number of new cases every day. We're still getting new cases, and it's in the increase in several places, but this increase is lesser every day. And therefore, what that means is that we can hope that the measures that we are now implementing are helping people, are producing the right impact. But we will have to continue to keep implementing these preventative measures, because if we give up too quickly, we might end ourselves up in a situation where we have a rapid spread of COVID-19, something that we certainly do not now. In our approach to help businesses, we were always talking about mainly helping workers. We didn't want to judge whether a worker is working for a small independent hardware store or for a large international box grocery outfit. We wanted to ensure that Canadian workers and families that depend on the salaries of these workers get the necessary assistance, which is why we proposed our wage subsidy program, and that we're going ahead also with our emergency support measure. But we're always working to fight against tax haven, tax avoidance, and tax cheating, and we've taken strong measures to get that money and to impose consequences on companies that practice these measures, and we shall continue to do so.
As I've said a couple of times, I think there is reason for cautious optimism. We're hearing that from medical officers across the province, across the country, noting that the increase in cases is getting smaller every day in many places, that we're still seeing more cases every day, but fewer than in previous days, which is a sign that our efforts are working. We are continuing to do the right things as a country that is getting this virus under control. However, we need to continue to do those things, because as soon as we loosen up, if we loosen up too quickly or if we're not careful, we could see a return spike of COVID-19 that will be problematic for citizens and for the economic recovery. So we're going to focus on making sure we're doing things very, very carefully, but it is encouraging to see that the things Canadians are doing from coast to coast to coast to help each other out, to stay safe, are working. That's why we need to continue them.
Juste pour comprendre sur les paradis fiscaux, je suis pas sûr
Just to make sure I understand what you said about tax havens, I'm not too sure I understood it, or perhaps you didn't exactly respond to the question. Can you say today that the money that our taxpayers' money will not help companies that have accounts in tax haven countries. Can you tell us that that will not occur or not? Answer, we are helping workers throughout the country. Someone who's working for a company that has a family that needs that income and that job was lost, they need help. They need to be able to pay for their groceries, pay their rent. And that is the viewpoint that we took in order to help people, whether it be a large company, small company. We are helping the workers that need help. Now, with regard to tax evasion, we will always continue to fight against businesses that choose to do so, to try and get out of paying their fair share of taxes. That is why we invested more than $1 billion in the Canada Revenue Agency to increase the tools that are available to them to find the companies that aren't paying their fair share. Thank you, everybody.